Joel, so good to have you here with us. To lead things off today, I mean, you've had such great success as an author, writing novels about topics related to current world events, mostly about, and Bible prophecy rolls all into that as well. Why do these topics resonate with you so much?
Well, my first novel is really what put me on the map, and that changed everything. I'd never written a political thriller before, a novel before. I barely read novels at the time. I was working in Washington in politics. But the first novel was called The Last Jihad, and I started it in January of 2001. That date's important because as I start writing, the first page puts you inside the cockpit of a jet plane that's been hijacked by radical Islamist terrorists, and it's coming in on a kamikaze attack mission into an American city. Now, that was almost 9 months before the al-Qaeda attacks on Washington and New York on September 11th, 2001. And my opening scene leads to my fictional American president in The Last Jihad deciding he needs to remove Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq because of Saddam's connection to terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. Now, all of that was written before 9/11. I mean, I was finishing it on the morning of 9/11 in Washington, D.C., and it released about 5.5 months before the war in Iraq. So President Bush hadn't even made the decision to go definitely. It was a debate, should we, shouldn't we? So that was weird. And I wasn't trying to be prophetic. I didn't think it was going to happen. I just thought, I want to write a novel that's entertaining, but warns a worst case scenario of what if American leaders get blindsided by a threat, in this case, threat from radical Islamism, that they don't see coming. And that worried me. And that book hit #1 on Amazon.com. The Last Jihad spent 11 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. I did 160 radio and TV and print interviews in less than 60 days. And people are like, who are you? And where is this coming from? And by the way, aren't you Jewish?
Yeah.
A name like Joel Rosenberg? Yes. But you seem to believe in Jesus. You're an evangelical. Yes. Well, how is that even possible? How can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? And that was not just a book. That began a whole career.
Now, you just sitting here hearing you describe that to me gives me chills all these years later. As that was unfolding that year in 2001, that you had written this prior to the actual events, and then it's pretty much mirrors it.
It was weird.
How did that make you feel? I mean, I got to believe it had an effect on you.
Yeah. Well, it did. Look, there were specific differences between my novel and what really happened, but it was close enough.
The general framework.
Yeah. And that's why I said to me, look, I'm not psychic. I'm not prophetic. I'm not predicting these things are going to happen. This is entertainment, but it's this entertainment designed to get people to think what could happen. Mm-hmm. The fact that some of these things have happened now is not because I knew it. It's because I was projecting forward. What if the people who hate us most do the type of things that are consistent with their objectives? In other words, I study evil people, and I think, I believe them. Let's play forward. Let's do a war game and project forward what they might do. I'll give you another example. So I've been doing this now for 20-some years and 5 million copies sold, and that is weird. I mean, some people, U.S. News and World Report called me a modern Nostradamus. Look, I'm not a Nostradamus. I'm not a psychic. I'm not a clairvoyant, But I'll give you another example. I wrote a novel a few years ago called The Kremlin Conspiracy, and it's about a Russian dictator who emerges to power and then he's trying to decide, should I invade Ukraine or should I invade the 3 Baltic countries that are in NATO, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? Well, and then he's about to do one of those. I won't explain exactly what happens in the Kremlin conspiracy, but it feels very much ripped out of what has happened over the last few years with Vladimir Putin. Again, that is not prophecy. Now, I have written novels that are what if a prophecy like Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog, where Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, other countries come and surround Israel in the last days of history and try to destroy and obliterate and annihilate Israel. That was a novel called The Ezekiel Option. So I have written novels based on prophecy, on the idea of like, let's imagine, we don't know exactly, but let's imagine what if this end times prophecy that most Christians and Americans don't even think about, let's imagine what if it came true in our lifetime, what might it look like? But yeah, those are weird. And I think what I have found is, Lord, I didn't see this at the beginning, but I see that you are opening doors for me not only to talk about real geopolitical threats to America, to Israel, to our moderate Muslim allies and so forth. You're giving me an opportunity to talk about prophecy, talk about the Bible, and talk about my faith in Jesus Christ, because these books are so weird. They feel so ripped from tomorrow's headlines that it's asking people to say, well, what do you really believe in your heart? Where does this stuff come from? And, to do that on CNN, to do that on Fox, talk about it with the New York Times, the Jerusalem Post is not normal, but it is exciting because it became a whole ministry that I prayed that the Lord would use these books in this season of my life to do something useful for him. I weave spiritual themes, and even the gospel in some of the books are pretty clear as characters are dealing with life and death and where are we going and how do I know if I make it through today or tomorrow? And we've seen people actually come to faith in Jesus Christ through the novels, and other people have their faith and courage. So I don't know that everybody's trying to use fiction to tell the truth, but that's essentially what I'm trying to do.
But what a platform.
Yeah, who knew?
Tremendous. Yeah, who knew?
Because I was a failed political consultant for almost 10 years prior. Everyone I ever worked for, Chris, lost. Including I was on the comeback campaign team of then former Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. It took him 9 more years to come back. I played no useful role. Obviously, he's the Prime Minister now, but and he's the longest serving, but not with my help.
Yeah, that's great. So the last time we spoke, the Rosenberg Report was just getting off the ground on TBN. And now here we are about 18 months later. What can viewers expect to see on your show? And what can they expect to experience on it?
Well, there's been some implications out of writing novels that feel like they're telling you the future. People started saying, well, what is your analysis of what's really happening in the world? And so, in 2020, I started 2 news sites, digital news sites, All Israel News, All Arab News, and built a team of Israeli and Palestinian reporters to cover what's really happening every day, every moment, every day, with credible journalism. And what happened is Matt Crouch, the head of Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN, he got intrigued by that and thought, there's nobody else is doing that. That should be a TV show. And he invited me to come to Dallas and sit down with him. And he said, I'd like you to do a TV show. And I said, well, Matt, I have a face for radio. Let's be honest. I don't think you want me on primetime television every week. I don't know. And he goes, well, look, first he laughed. Then he said, look, do you realize, Joel, that no one has ever done a primetime news and analysis show from Israel about Israel in the region on any American television network? I'm like, seriously? He said, no, never, not in prime time. He said, you should be doing this. It's part of what you're already doing, which is in your novels, you're talking about what could happen. But on your news site, you're talking about what is happening. But television is more powerful than digital. Most people don't want to read. They want to see it. Go take us to meet with the people that are changing the Middle East for good, for bad. And it took me a while, but I said yes. I didn't know television, and I didn't know I would have the time, but I did it. And the first season was exciting, but season 2, what we're in now, this is where I realized, I'm supposed to be doing this.
Yeah, this is where the real work begins.
Now I'm covering the worst war in the modern history of Israel. We're in Israel's darkest hour, and I'm not only interviewing people who've lost their loved ones or who died on October 7th, murdered by Hamas. I'm interviewing the families of hostages who are in Gaza right now. And most recently, as you and I sit here, just before I came to the United States, the Israeli Defense Forces invited me to go into Gaza to suit up, get inside an armored personnel carrier, and go into the worst fighting in the southern part of Gaza and go into newly discovered terror tunnels that had never been seen by any reporter before and cover inside the cages where Israeli hostages were actually held and the lair of the leadership of the senior Hamas terrorists. It was surreal.
Oh, so you've done this
I just
already.
did that. And we just
That's great.
We just broadcast an hour-long special. Normally my show is a half an hour on Thursday nights. But that, we got so much material. I called the head of TV and I said, can we do an hour special?
Did you ever think you were going to end up in a situation like that?
No, no Israeli Jew, much less an evangelical, thinks I want to go into Gaza. But as the war has continued, I thought, well, there are some reporters being allowed to go in. And I thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to take my viewers inside what's happening. Maybe I should request the permission to be one of those embedded reporters. I did request, and I started to pray. And I said, Lord, if you want me to go, I'll do it. My wife was supportive. Then I thought, well, do we have a problem with our marriage? You want me to go into Gaza? No, she said, well, I'm not telling you to go in, but if you want to go, I support you. And I got a call like at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, and they said, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, you want to go with us? And I thought they would take us to some place that wasn't even no fighting anymore. Maybe that they had captured it weeks before.
Area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to say we'd been there, look into an old... No, they took us into the center of Khan Yunis, which is the city where the most intense fighting has been going on, and into tunnels, like I said, that had never been seen by reporters before. And I think that's a sign that what we're doing at All Israel News and on the Rosenberg Report on TBN has a credibility that even the Israeli government has a long list of reporters who say they want to go in, are saying, we're going to let Joel in. We're going to invite him in.
For sure. So as we've been discussing, lots happening in Israel right now based on the October 7th massacre, most of it negative. From your perspective, what does the future look like for Israel and the Palestinians?
How much time did you say?
Well, I know. We could talk for like a week about that.
Right.
Let's do the movie
Let me say
pitch
spiritually.
version.
Look, I believe Israel's being rattled to its core, as are Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. The Bible says in the minor prophets that he is going to God says, I will shake Israel. And then in another passage, he says, I will shake all the nations. We're seeing Israel being shaken. Why? It's in God's mercy. Now, it's not God who sent the terrorists. It's Satan who comes to rob, kill, and destroy. But God sovereignly allowed this to happen for a number of reasons, but one of which is to get us to think about life and death, that we were becoming complacent. Most Israelis had never received Jesus as Messiah because it's not so much that they've rejected the gospel. Most Jews have never heard the gospel. I'm Jewish. I'm a believer in Jesus, but it's a miracle that my family knows Jesus. Most Jews have never even heard. They're rejecting the history of Christianity, which has not always been loving and kind to the Jewish people. Evangelical Christianity in our modern era has been incredibly wonderful, and that's why Jews are going, well, is it Christianity or is it the way certain people who called themselves in the past Christians treated us? Maybe they weren't really listening to the Bible. Well, no, obviously they weren't, because Jesus is Jewish and Jesus was an Israeli and so were the apostles. And so to be an anti-Semite is to be exactly opposite of what Jesus calls us to be. But all that to say, we're seeing Israelis and Palestinians show an interest, a curiosity. How do you know God? And how do you know internal peace when there is no external peace? And what does the future hold? What does the Bible say? And I think that's important, more important even than the geopolitical element, which is important. Like, where do we go from here? But ultimately, God is trying to get our attention to come to him and make peace with him before he's willing to make peace on earth.
So do these recent events fit prophetically from what we see in the Bible? Or
yes.
is it just
absolutely.
sort of...
I don't think that you can fit this particular set of October 7th to now events into a specific end times prophecy.
Right.
But in the general prophecies where Jesus says, as we get closer to his return, right, his delivery into the world, you're going to be going through wars and rumors of wars. He talks about them as birth pangs, right? Well, what is a birth pang? It's contraction and release, contraction and release. Prior to October 7th, we were in the most exciting release period in modern Israel. We had a peace treaty with Egypt. We had a peace treaty with Jordan.
Yeah,
we had a peace treaty with all the Abraham Accords countries. We had 6 Arab-Israeli peace treaties. There's never been as much in all of the history of modern history of Israel. And we were about to make peace with the Saudis. What happened on the 7th? Well, we went into a contraction, the most intense contraction, and we're still in the contraction. It's like, and it's the darkest hour that Israel's in. So that fits. Psalm 83 talks, I don't believe Psalm 83 is a prophecy about a specific event, but it talks about the spirit. Why do certain countries hate Israel? And why do they say, as is written in Psalm 83, come, the enemies say, let us wipe out Israel and erase their memories forever. That's what Hamas is trying to do. That's what the Iranian regime is trying to do, Hezbollah and others. So we're in this season, but we're also in a season where the church and the nations are being divided into sheep and goats. Are you with Israel and the Jewish people? You don't have to agree with every policy or every statement by an Israeli prime minister or whatever. No, that's not what God's saying. Do you believe the Jewish people are loved by God and have the inherent right to exist and have their own sovereignty and freedom? Or are you against them, fundamentally against them? That's what God is separating out and giving people a chance to make their decision. And it's not just nations, it's individuals, and it's, the church needs to decide, are we in to love Israel and the Jewish people, as well as showing compassion to Palestinians, or are we going to say, that's not any of our business? That would be a huge mistake.
Good word to contemplate. As you mentioned earlier, we could talk about this for days and days and days, and then probably go into next week with it too. But we are out of time, and I just want to thank you so much for being with us today and just sharing about the show and from your heart about what's happening in Israel these days.
Well, I hope you found it entertaining.
Entertaining and educational.
It's led to a whole different life for me of not just writing about entertaining novels and trying to develop them into movies and screenplays, but real life is stranger than fiction right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.